Hey y'all, this is Steve Hill, knife maker in Texas, and welcoming you to Bladeology podcast with Jeremiah Burbank at the controls. So hang on, it's pocket hot rod time.
All right, we're gonna jump into it like we do every week. Welcome to another episode of the Bladeology podcast. This is the vocal representation of Jeremiah Burbank from PVK Vegas, and we are on this week with Johnny Stout. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me on here.
Absolutely, I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this, sitting down and talking about knives and your work in particular. So tell us, how did you get into knife making? Where did it begin for you?
Well, knife making started in about the mid 80s, but my passion and love for knives started when I was probably 5 years old. And I'll give you just a little bit of history on that right quick. Um, I was raised in a real small town in West Texas named Fort Davis. My grandfather was a government trapper in those days, and this was before I started to school, so I would go on the trap line with him a lot of times. Well, he was always breaking the handle off a knife, and I was assuming that his boss would replace his knife when he wore one out, or but it was always a case double blade trapper.
Oh, right.
So he would pass these old broken knives off to me, and I'd whittle out a stick and poke a hole in it with a piece of wire, and I'd stick a handle on it. And so anyway, by the time I was probably 7 or 8 years old, I had 5 or 6 of his knives that he had passed on to me. But that was just when I started to school in the first grade. Well, all of the kids back in those days carried a pocket knife. So we would get out at lunch and recess, and we would play different games with them, stretch and mumbly peg and whatever. Most kids today don't know what those games are. But anyway, that goes way, way, way back there. But I never knew there was such a thing of handmade knives until the mid 80s, and just happened to see one uh, at a Thanksgiving meal we had one day, and my brother brought out this knife and showed it to me, and I thought, boy, that sure is a pretty knife. It was a fixed blade, mirror polished, and the whole nine works. And so I said, where in the world did you get that thing? He said, well, Jim makes these. I said, what do you mean he makes them? How do you make a knife? He said, yeah, he's got a shop there in his backyard and he makes them. I said, nah, no way. That you no. He said, yeah. I said, we'll go over there tomorrow if you want to. So he took me over there, and it was a couple of miles away. It was in the same town. So we went over there, and he gave me the shop tour, and I was just blown away. I couldn't believe it. When I left there, he'd sold me one of his old grinders, a bandsaw, and two buffers.
Oh man, jumped right in. Okay, all right.
So that got me started. But I had a real job like most people back in those days. So I just piddled with it, on part time and as a hobby for years and years. And in the I think it was 80. That was in about 83. In about 87, I got the job. I worked for a company, and I got transferred to San Antonio, and then I worked a couple of years, and I was fortunate enough that I got a buyout on my and left the company.
Oh, okay.
So I started my early retirement. I think I was 48 years old. And I'd been making knives for quite a few years just as a hobby. And I prowled around, and I thought, well, I'll look around for a job. And so I put a few interviews in here and a few interviews there, and never found anything that I really was passionate about. And a few weeks rolled by, and I just kind of had a conversation with myself one day, and I said, I had a good job and I didn't have to leave. I think I'll try this knife thing for a while. Had my little shop in the backyard. So I started, my kids were young.
Mm.
So I started making knives. And back in those days, there were no knife shows to speak of. There were a gun show around every corner, which there pretty much still is, at least in Texas. So I started doing gun shows, and taking my knives, and I would sell knives, and I'd go home and make some more, but I was making fixed blades back then. I'd never made a folder. Well, I'd made one, but it was pretty rough. But anyway, I did that for years. Got both of my kids out of school, went through college, and knives paid for every penny of it.
Oh, wow.
So I have stayed with it since. I've gotten mostly away from the fixed blades. I still make one every now and then, or, if I take an order, or, like right now is a good time because people are getting ready for Christmas and hunting season. And it's a big thing in Texas, with the hunting season. But so I just, again, I was making primarily fixed blades, and I started making a few single blade slip joints, and I'd take them to a show, and I'd sell a few hunting knives and skinners, and I'd bring my slip joints home. And I'd go home and make a few more of this and make a few more of that, and I'd go back and I'd bring my slip joints home, my folders home, and so this went on for quite a while. And people would look at them, but they weren't up to par. So they would just kind of pass on them, and this went on for quite a while, probably a year or so, and then all of a sudden it just kind of turned, and people started buying my folders, and I was bringing my fixed blades home. But I didn't know what was happening. I just really liked it,
Right, right.
I thought it was just okay. This is okay. But then I found real people, real collectors that would critique my knives and show me and tell me. And again, I had no training whatsoever. I've self-taught pretty much. I've probably not been in more than 4 or 5 other knife shops other than my own since I started making knives.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's pretty much the same way today. I rarely get an opportunity to go visit with someone else and spend time in their shop, but we got some good friends around Texas now that sometimes we do spend a couple of days with one another. But so anyway, that's kind of how it all started. And once I decided, okay, I'm going to do this, and it's made me a pretty good living for a long, long time. And I've never let myself think that that last knife is the best that I can do. I'm thinking, no, I can do better than that. So I just keep trying and keep putting them out there and keep people buy them, and for a product that no one has to have, I have absolutely no complaints, none whatsoever.
It's certainly not a commodity, right? It's a piece that somebody buys because they fall in love with it and they have to have it.
Exactly.
I mean, the transition from fixed blades to folders is always that's the jump, right? A lot of guys, it makes more sense to get into folders, right? The market for folders is sort of more interesting. Tell me, so you're saying you're self-taught. How did you handle any custom folders from other makers at any of these gun shows?
Well, that far back, there wasn't very many, and if there were, I wasn't around them very much. But as the years went by, then at least in Texas, there were some guys cropping up that were just magicians almost. Some of them are not here any longer. Joe Caius was one, Warren Osborne another. So eventually I did get to see top quality work and realize what it was. Fit and finish is the name of the game. Now, in today's market, with YouTube and videos and all of the schools and things that go on, a person can learn some really, really detailed work very fast. Fit and finish is the name of the game. I don't care what kind of knife it is, fit and finish. So, I see somebody that their work impresses me and I want to do what he does or what that person does. How'd you do that? Well, for a long, long time, people would not tell you how they did that. They were very, very, they keep that to themselves. But it's not necessarily that way now. Most of the people say, well, hey, come over here. Let me show you how I did this. No, they'll pull you aside and, spend whatever time it takes. You understand? Are you getting what I'm saying? And they'll do that now. But it hadn't always been that way. So the hard times are over, I think, for the knife maker because there's just so much information out there, and the quality of work. What took me 10 years to learn, a guy can learn in 6 months now.
Right.
But that's just kind of the knife business, I guess you'd say.
It is partially, and you're absolutely correct about the knowledge base is vast and available at your fingertips in a moment, but time tested fit and finish is not something that can be picked up via YouTube, right? I mean, that's decades of looking at an object and understanding the parts of the object are just as important as the whole picture, and making sure that it's, like you said, it's fit and finish or nothing else.
One of the hard things about making a folder, especially the type of folders I build now, where they're all basically screwed together, and you may have a pile of parts of 30 pieces there, and they have to fit. Everything has to fit, and that takes a lot of it. Equipment has come a long way too. The grinders we have now, the belts, the everything that we use in our shop now is so far advanced compared, and it keeps getting better and better and better. But a fixed blade, you've got a blade and two slab handles primarily, and a few pins maybe, and then you can expand on that. You can have a guard, and you can expand on that, and you can have a tapered tang, and you can expand on that, maybe have some file work, and then you can expand on that, and maybe instead of having a stainless or carbon blade, you could have a Damascus blade, and you can expand on that and have engraving, and go and on and on and on. And what could have started out as a $150 field grade hunting knife could turn into or end up being a $1,500 piece that a person probably wouldn't take out and use.
Right. Yeah.
And I think deep down, I still make what I call a field grade knife to be taken out and used, but that's not my passion. I like to build them because I like my work to be out and people using it, where they're going to put it in their gun safe or they're going to take it out, on their next hunt or whatever they're going to do with it. But anyway, those are just my thoughts and my ideas. That doesn't mean that they're universal, because most people look at me and think, well, you old crotchety thing, you this is the real world out here now. You've been locked up in that shop for too many years.
Well, I mean, I guess, well, yeah, in perspective, right?
Sure.
I've talked to a lot of collectors and a lot of dealers, and I've had the, well, what do you carry kind of conversation, and it turns out that really it just depends on the person. I mean, I've met people who certainly collect, high end art knives, and they just, right in the gun safe is where they live, and they come out at a dinner party once in a while. But I've met plenty of collectors who love art knives and love high end dress knives so much that they can't stand to not carry them and just use them all the time. It's really, there's two ends of the spectrum there. I mean, certainly some people can afford to, you know, carry around obviously art knives, and that might be a little bit out of some people's, budgets, but I think the love and the use of the object is just as important. Because essentially that's why the creation of the thing is there, is, it's a cutting tool.
Exactly. And it my wife is the biggest knife nut that I've ever met. She collects knives, and she loves them. She's never bored at a knife show or gun show that we go to. She's out buying knives. So
Oh, say, shouldn't we all be as lucky?
yeah,
That's
really.
that's a perfect match there.
Oh, I have to brag on her. I'll tell you what. I'll say, can you watch my table for just a second? I need to go really, really bad. Well, I'm fixing to go over there and look at those knives on that table over there, so you better hurry.
There you go. So okay, so other Texas makers. So right, Warren Osborne, Joe Caius. Those guys are just kind of well known in our industry, just a little bit. Was that give us a time frame? I mean, there must have been a point where you were making field grade folders, and then, by field grade I mean, not dressed, and then at some point
Yeah.
there was a transition to sort of what more people might be familiar with your work now, which is definitely the higher dress knife. Tell us a little bit about that transition.
Well, I guess the first really, really nice knife that I actually got to see, put my hands on, was when I was still working, and I got to visit Joe Caius's shop when he lived down in the Rio Grande Valley one time. I was working down there and called him up and introduced myself over the phone, and he invited me to come out to his shop, so I did. And so he started showing me stuff that I'd never seen before, and I'd only freehand hologrammed up until that time. And I saw Joe pick up a little fixed blade, and we were just chatting, and he picked it up and started grinding on it, and he was flat grinding on a work wrist, and I thought, holy moly, I've died and gone to heaven now. I never seen anybody grind on a work wrist before. So anyway, we visited back and forth, and I ended up buying a surface grinder from him while I was there.
Oh, there you go.
So that was my downfall into buying more shop equipment for my shop, was that surface grinder. And he actually delivered it up to where I live now in New Braunfels, Texas. And but I got to see quality work, it, and I'd never seen it before, so I didn't know. You know, I thought my work was good,
Right.
but I'd never seen good handmade work before. You see factory knives and displays and everything, and they're nice and shiny and pretty, and but I'd never seen a really, really high quality um, knife like Joe Caius made. Um, the equipment, um, it started out, I had one old square wheel grinder, the one I bought initially when I told you I went to visit
Right.
the shop. Um, and that thing ran wide open all the time. I never heard of variable speed before. Um, but it it just has evolved. It's taken me, I guess, all of these years to get to where I am today, wherever that is. I don't know, but I, I'm one of the guys that, look, I want to build what I want to build. Okay. And thankfully, what I want to build, there's a lot of, there's enough folks out there that want it that I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing, um, and I think, I mean, there's a whole new wave of knife makers coming along now with Forged in Fire, um, and I see them really getting into it and doing some really good work. My own personal beliefs is that you need to know how to make a knife before you try to forge a knife. But that's, again, that's just me.
I don't I don't think that's inaccurate at all. I mean, I think the basics are always very important.
Well, my work has evolved. Like I said, I've never stuck with the slip joint part of it. I've evolved what I'd consider over into the liner locks and the automatics, but I still make slip joints. Matter of fact, I'm finishing one today, or probably finish it tomorrow. And I've got a backlog of 3 or 4 of them. But one of the things that I'm finding with all of this shutdown, there's a lot of people that are staying at home and they still want to shop, but they're not shopping for the high end stuff as much as the mid price, at least for me. I'm not sure how it would be universally, of course, but so my work has kind of evolved, like I said, from the um, basic fixed blades. I've got into, and I have a hmm, maybe it's a brain block. I don't know what it is, but I I can look at a knife and I know a knife that's well made when I see one, but I see a lot of knives that have no character to them, and I'm not sure how to describe that. But in my mind, what's pleasing to the eye, pleasing to your eye, is gentle curves and arcs. And a lot of the knives that I see today are not like that. They're straight. So there's nothing appealing to my eye. Um, Gentle arcs and curves. That's what I get off on.
I mean, I would agree that a lot of a good deal of the modern work can be very derivative. A lot of titanium. A lot of harsh lines. I don't know if that's a rebuttal to previous designs or not, but it's certainly I've had this conversation with others of just we kind of just throw around the knife is lacking soul, right? It's lacking character, it's lacking personality. Um, there's just something that's lost in translation, so to say.
I haven't heard it said that way, but I totally agree. I mean, I can see. I mean, like I said, I know a well-made knife if I don't necessarily know it if I see it, but if I pick it up, I can, just like yourself. I'm sure you know a well-made knife when you have one in your hand, but I don't know. To me, I have to please me is try to please my customers, and but the thing that, if it doesn't appeal to my eye, the knife is unappealing. I guess I'll just leave it at that.
I mean, yeah, that's certainly reasonable. Right, so slip joints, folders, and my favorite of the bunch, automatics.
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 Okay.
Knives with springs.
Yep.
Um, Tell us, how did that come to be?
Okay. Do you know who Larry Chew is?
Yes, indeed. Yep.
Okay. To me, Larry Chew is probably the most innovative automaker out there, and maybe it's has been out there ever. I mean, that's his mind.
Yeah,
He can visualize something in his mind and he can build it.
that's it.
And if you've never had him on your program, he would be a he'd
He's
you may never get him off.
he's scheduled for February. So
Oh, hey, super duper, good deal.
yeah.
Well, what I can tell you about autos, then I learned from Larry.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, years ago. Um, Again, after I'd been into the folders for a few years, and met Larry actually at a knife show one time, and he come wandering through with this little knife that had roller bearings in the blade, and I thought, man, I ain't never seen nothing like that before. But it was a liner lock, and we became friends, and over the years we run into each other pretty often at the shows, and he still had a real job, and so he was working, so it was just part time for him. So anyway, we he invited me up, and he lived in Dallas then, or right out of Dallas there. So he invited me up, and I went up there and spent a few days with him, and he showed me how to build the first double action, and that's the mechanism that I still use today.
Oh wow. Okay.
And now he's expanded on that one mechanism. He's got a half a dozen of them now, I think. But I've been able to stick with that one, and I've got, I think, 5 different models of autos that I use that same mechanism on. It's a push button um, with a kick spring, leaf spring in it. They're not easy for me to make because I'm not a machinist, and everything that I learned in a do to the machines that I have to use, I've learned on my own, but I can build them. They take me a lot of time. I don't build a lot of them because that puts it in that really really high end market, at least for me, and it's pretty small. Uh, but I guess they're actually one of my favorites as far as the total package. Because I don't make a what I call a black and gray one. I make a nice one, and usually they'll be engraved with Damascus here and Damascus there, and nice engraving, high end ivory or pearl, something like that on it, which all of that material jacks up the price considerably also. So the higher you get, the seem like the smaller that market gets.
Oh yeah. I guess it depends greatly on where that market might be. Um, I think that there's a resurgence of interest in high end automatics, at least for where I'm sitting. I think everybody has a different customer basis, but I certainly see a lot of interest in that style coming back lately.
Well, it's I think it's a small bunch of guys that are doing it. At least to my knowledge, I'm not. I don't know too many of them, but I know there are knife makers that are doing unbelievable work. The ones that are really scary are the ones from overseas. The quality, the quality of work those guys are doing is uh,
Yeah.
fantastic, fantastic.
Thankfully, the market for automatics is still a U.S. based only market for now. I mean, collectors the world over, but mostly the super high end automatics remain in the U.S. I mean, we've got less than 10 active knife makers working in the field of automatics currently. So I mean, that gives
Really?
that gives you an idea of,
Oh wow.
you know, the scarcity drives demand. I find anyway. But yeah, so you're talking about using natural materials. What would you say that you prefer, the pearl and the ivory?
I think to me those are the two most high-end natural handle materials that I can put on a knife. Now here's the way I look at a knife, and people kind of think I'm kind of stupid when I say this. I said I can make a knife that's plain Jane, and it'll perform, and it'll do any and everything that knife is designed to do, and I can sell it for, I'm just going to throw a number out there, I'm going to say $500. But I can take that knife, and I can change the blade from basic material, which possibly be stainless, to Damascus blade, maybe even a commission piece, which I do commission Damascus from a lot of makers. That's what they do. They make steel. Ivory handles, Damascus back bar, Filework liners, anodized liners, engraved bolsters, and on and on and on. So I've taken that same knife that I could have sold for $5 and dress it up, maybe sell it for $5,000. The example that I use, I said, well, you can see this beautiful woman, and she comes out with her Hammerin rollers and got her nightgown on and no makeup, and she comes in and you look at her, well, then she goes back and gets dressed, comes out all gussied up, hair fixed, makeup, lipstick. That ain't the same woman. Well, that's the way I look at these knives,
The price of dinner just tripled.
You dress them up, and I think things that are appealing to the eye demand at least a second look, and a lot of times they'll demand somebody, I've got to have this, So it's not just like it's the only one in the world, but it's yours, and it's something that they like, something they see, and a lot of times they'll take it home with them. Thank goodness.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. You've got to you've got to buy dinner, fall in love, and then take it home. That's the progression of yeah, exactly.
Well, the mechanism would be the same no matter materials or not. But if I'm going to spend that much time on one, unless I intentionally build it to be taken out and used and abused and, put up and not taken care of versus something else. But that's not what I enjoy doing. I enjoy building a knife that is somebody's eyes are going to pop out when they see it. And, hopefully they'll appreciate it enough that they will. And so far, I've been very fortunate that there's been enough people out there that I think I'm down to 2 knives or 2 folders right now, and it's probably the lowest my inventory's been in forever, and one of them happens to be an auto.
Oh, there we go. I'm loving it. It's something about automatics. It's the mechanical contrivance almost that it's very appealing. The press button, the blade fires, and it locks into place is it's mechanical at its best, for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And not being a machinist, I'm not. If it's very complicated, I'm not be able to do it or figure it out, at least without some really, really struggles. But like I say, I've got the one mechanism and I've stuck with it. It's basically foolproof, fail safe and foolproof, and it's Larry's, the one he taught me. And like I said, I've got 5 different models now that I use that same mechanism on, and each one of them has been very, very successful.
So a lot of your knives feature very, very detailed engraving, and the thumb studs of some of the manuals are particularly interesting. The way you finish them, Can you tell us a little bit about that? The turning process or the inlays that you choose?
Well, on the thumb studs, I make those myself. Uh, a lot of times I've got a little lathe in my shop, and I'll turn a rod down, uh, drill it and tap it, and then I'll flute flute the stem on it one way or the other. Um, Depending on what my handle material is, I'll take a little tiny piece of that, maybe a little scrap piece, and I'll super glue it to the end of a little rod. Let's just say 1/8 inch. Well, we'll go a little larger. Say a 3/16 round rod of some sort. Super glue it on there. Then I'll turn that down, and then I'll counterbore the head of that thumb stud. Then set that cabochon down in there. Put that on the lathe, and then turn that down and blend it in and polish it. Um, so that's the way I do my own thumb studs normally. I just make them myself, and try to use the handle material that I've got on the knife, you know. And I do the same thing for my push button. I'll counterbore that and inlay a little piece of the handle material in there. So I'll have a piece of one in the thumb stud, one in the push button, and then my handle material, you know. So it all kind of nothing contra.
It's it matches wonderfully. I appreciate the dress. The thumb studs are amazingly turned, and then to have the push button and the thumb stud, it all flows very very nicely, very very well. And then so the file work you were talking about earlier. How did that? Tell us a little bit about how that developed. File work is one of those very specific things that everyone has their own style. Some people were influenced. Um, tell us a little bit about that.
I've seen some firework that is just the firework itself is just a work of art, and I've tried to I've looked at some of it, and I've tried to copy it, and I don't have the knack to get it like that. So over the years, I've just kind of found out what works for me. I do a lot of rope, a lot of vine. I do a lot of Damascus, like for backspacers, and then I'll etch that, and that just makes the firework just jump out that much more for you. You're not only seeing the pattern of the Damascus, but you're seeing the pattern of the firework, whether it's a rope or a vine or whatever it is. And I just use my regular round chainsaw files that I have. You know, I go from maybe a 30 seconds to eighth, 3/16, sometimes a quarter, but rarely ever get that big. And I just freehand scratch a pattern on there, and then I try to follow it. So it's nothing real sophisticated or anything, and it just takes a little time and patience, because it's kind of boring, to be honest with you, to sit there and doing that but you're not doing but 4 or 5 inches, 3 or 4 inches, depending on the size of the knife. But again, it's one of those things, like I was talking about a while ago, dressing this thing up, rather than just a plain backspacer, whatever it is. Well, gussy up the backspacer. Instead of just plain liners, dress up the liners, anodize them. And I'm starting to do a new process, and I'll have to give credit where credit's due here from Don Hanson. He was doing a little technique on where he was doing various colors up and down his liners on the back, and so I looked at that and I thought, well, that just really looks good. So I've kind of copied that from Don and give him all the credit for it.
Yeah, Don is I love his knives as well. They're,
Mm-hmm.
the epitome of simple, straightforward beauty and function.
Yeah,
That's the,
he can
it's
do it all, man.
yeah, it's
It's
it's it's
good.
really far out. Yeah. So yeah, new process. That's always good. So and as we're talking about the style of dress that you put into these knives, um, because of I think because of the era, and also because of the more finite finishing that you're working with, you rarely see, you don't actually use a lot of our modern mokutais or makumes. You really, I mean, stainless, engraved. I see a lot of mammoth tooth. Um, do you not prefer the mokutai, or is it really, it's just you can't really engrave mokutai like you can like a
I
416?
have used it in the past. Uh, I haven't in quite a while. I like it, um, even though the color and uh, what you can get out of it, even though all of that beauty is there. To me, it's still just a plain flat surface.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know if that makes any sense, but no, it is beautiful, and the guys that are doing it, they're doing a fantastic job of it. But I don't know. To me anymore, I feel like at least my knives they're kind of naked if I don't have them engraved. Now, what really got me hooked on engraving was a few years ago. Well, it's been quite a few years ago. Um, a knife maker. He's semi-retired now, I think. A guy named Jim Small. He and I did. Oh, I bet we've done hundreds of projects together. But he had a um, well, it was his style, his technique that I really, really liked. And I'll have to tell you a quick story. He did a knife for me one time, and there was a little local knife show that was down in Brownsville, Texas. So I was down there for the bunch of us boys from South Texas were down there, and so this fella came through, and he saw this knife on my table, and he looked at it, and he looked at it, and he looked at it. It was an automatic, my Zodiac, and this was on a Saturday, and I thought, well, he's just going to buy that darn thing. Well, he didn't, but he came back the next day. He handed me a piece of black and white paper that had. He said, "I got this from my engraver last night." And I looked at that piece of paper, and it was engraving on a shotgun. And that he is a wealthy, wealthy oil man from down there. He says, "My, I'm having a custom shotgun made in Belgium, and that's the engraving that's on that knife." He said, "That's the same engraving that's on your knife." I mean, he said, "The same engraving on my shotgun's the same engraving on your knife." So he bought that knife from me just because of that. Later on, I was telling Jim Small about this. He lives over there in Georgia. I told him that story, and he said, "You know what?" He said, "I took an engraving class one day at the University of Georgia, and my instructor was from Belgium, and he said, I bet you $1,000 bill that that's a guy that I learned that technique from." So that was pretty cool. But anyway, that's what hooked me on having my work engraved was just the fact that I collaborate with a lot of other artisans, just engravers. Like I've got a billet that David Lish paid for me that's coming in the next few days for some of his feather pattern Damascus, and I've collaborated with Julie Warinsky, and I mean just on and on and on. Veronique Laurent from overseas, and but I really appreciate the work that other artisans do, and I love to, have their work in my knives,
Yeah, certainly the artistic collaboration is, it's like a flexing of a very special muscle that only a few people have in common, and that's certainly the high artistic muscle, especially with engravers or steel makers
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
for a specific project. The Zodiac that you mentioned, just for the folks at home, so that has a thumb stud and it has a push button. Is the Zodiac, would that be considered a double action then?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. All of my mechanisms are double action. See what I do, if I'm not sure if you know how that works on that mechanism, but there's a leaf spring in there, and when you close the blade, it cocks that leaf spring and it rises up, and then the button pops out. It's got a coil spring in the button. The button pops out, and that leaf spring is resting on top of the button. So now it's a liner lock, it's built as a liner lock. So now you can open it, close it manually. So there's where you get your double action. Then you push the button, the leaf spring releases, kicks the blade out. So, but the Zodiac is the mechanism, or that's the first one that I had that I learned from Larry Chew.
The blade stop is not the thumb stud, correct?
It is on that knife,
It is.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, on the Zodiac. Yeah, you're right. It is. It's got dual thumb studs on it, and the thumb stud, the buttons are the stop. Now on some of the other ones, I've got a internal stop inside there, but the mechanism is the same. Other than that,
So the development of the engraving and the collaborations, what would you say, as far as collaborations go? How many, just as a for instance, is there one knife that exhibits the most collaborations via steel engraving? Is there one that would stand out to you in your build history?
I guess the one that the most recent that kind of made a splash. You're familiar with the group Knife Rights, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So last year, I collaborated for Knife Rights to build a knife for the NRA auction in Nashville. I invited Julie Wawrinski. All of this was donated for Knife Rights to engrave it. And I mentioned Veronique Laurent. She made the steel for it. And it was an auto. Well, due to the coronavirus, the NRA convention got canceled in, I think it was in early March, in Nashville. So that knife was going to go on auction there to raise money for the NRA Legislative Action Committee, I think is what that was for. Anyway, Doug Ritter worked out a deal with Rock Island Auction Service to auction that knife off. Money still going to the NRA. So the auction, it was valued at between, I think, $7,500 and $10,000, somewhere in that price range, if I remember right. And so Doug and myself, we were thinking, okay, we hope it'll bring that much. Well, it went on the live auction, and the auction lasted 22 seconds, 23 seconds, I think, and it auctioned for $35,000
Ooh.
plus a 15% buyer's royalty. So it was, I think 42,500. So
Okay.
that's the one that sticks in my mind
Right.
the most, because I'm thinking, okay, maybe you could kick a little of that back to the makers over here.
Yeah, right.
That didn't work out though.
Oh,
But
all right.
no, that's the one that sticks in my mind because it's the most recent. But it was a
Sure.
beautiful knife, Julie. I'm not sure how familiar you are with her work, but
Yeah, very much
it's
so.
just unbelievable that a human being can do that quality of work. And Veronique, she forged the blade steel for me and sent it back over here from where she lived. And then anyway, I built the knife and then turned it over to Doug, and then all of the events started happening. But bottom line, it turned out okay
Right, right.
for knife rights and for the NRA, which that's what it was for, and they ended up getting the money out of it. Probably maybe more than what it would have brought it at their auction, but you never know. But I've had some commission pieces that I'll have to tell you about one series of knives that I have. It's called the Legacy, and I mentioned Warren Osborne's name a little while ago. Well, Warren was, in my opinion, probably, well, he's the best knife maker I've ever met and ever known. Um, but he had a little small, just a liner lock, but I really liked that little knife. I mean, so here about maybe 2 years ago, something like that, well, I had an idea that I'd like to make a knife using that model. Uh, but before I did that, I wanted to get permission from his wife if she would think that would for me to do that. So I wrote her a letter and sent it to her and asked her what she thought about me making that. I wasn't going to make that same knife. I was going to blow it up and make an automatic out of it. So she ultimately agreed to let me do that. Had my permission, her permission for me to use Warren's name. So anyway, I made that knife and called the Legacy, and there's only going to be 10 of those made. I think I've made 3 of them so far, and they've all gone to collectors. And I've probably got one coming up within the next few months. Will be number 4. But I think as far as the one that emotionally has the biggest impact on me is that one knife right there. It uses the same mechanism, that same Larry Chew design, and I've just blown it up so it'll accommodate the spring, the push button, and the leaf spring, and so that's a fun project that I'm really proud of there, and just the fact that it kind of done in Warren's memory.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, tell us a little bit about your history with Warren during his active years. You were saying that himself and Joe Cayos were in the Texas area.
Warren lived in Waxahachie, and Joe lived out up here at Kerrville, which is about 80 miles from me. And uh, me and Harvey Dean, good friend of mine, we host a Hammerin here at my shop, and have hosted one for 2 times a year since well, the last one, which was supposed to have been earlier this year, we had to cancel, but it would have been our 50th Hammerin. So anyway, Joe and Warren had been down several times, and we had them down to instruct and to teach. And you just get to hang out with some guys, go to dinner with them, and talk knives, and that's about all knife makers talk about, it seems like. But anyway, just spending a little personal time with them, seeing them at shows, you know, slobbering all over their work, and you know. But both of them were just unbelievable, unbelievable knife makers. Tommy Oberreiner is in that same group, and his work is just off the charts. But those three were probably the three best knife makers I've ever known, and two of them are gone. But Tommy's still, and he's in there every day, doing what he does, and it just keeps getting better and better and better.
It's the continuation of the work, right? The legacy, great name for the project. Carrying on the sort of traditional or his traditional style with the mechanism and your influence, and to have such a limited number of them. I mean, it makes it even more all the better,
Yeah.
But 50 Hammerins. Tell us a little bit about that. When that's a lot of Hammerins.
Well, we started way back when I moved on the property that I'm in now. It's new. I don't know if, well, you don't know New Braunfels, but New Braunfels is just a sleepy little South Texas town when I moved here. But over the years, it has grown, 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 grown. But I've got a place outside of town. I got some acreage. So anyway, there were no Hammerins in the state of Texas back at those days. So Harvey Dean and I, we were going up to the ABS school or in Arkansas. They had a Hammerin twice a year. So we were going up there, and I was into forging back then and trying to follow the hierarchy, the journeyman, master, which I didn't follow that after a few years. But so anyway, we'd been to the ABS Hammerins up there for several years, and we got to talking one day, and we said, and in that interim, I had moved out to this property I'm on right now, and I told Harvey one day, I said, we ought to try to have our own Hammerin out here, because I already had my forging shop set up, and I had a hammer and a hydraulic press, and the whole 9 yards, and and just see if anybody could come, if anybody would come. So we kind of put the word out. I think we had 10 guys come in, and a lot of these folks had been going to this, just like we had. They'd been going to Arkansas to their Hammerin up there. So we started out with 10, and about, when the weekend was over, well, everybody says, well, when are you going to have another one? Y'all have another one, have another one. So we did. We scheduled another one about 6 months, and the next one we had about, I don't know, 15 or 16 people. Same thing happened. So it just kept growing and growing, and we got up to maximum, I think, about 30 people is about all I can accommodate in my shop. Uh, and we have bladesmiths from all over come in and teach. So there will be like 5 instructors, and so you can go to one class. If you're not interested in that one, you can go in the other one. So it's pretty loose. But so we the one earlier this year is the first one we've missed since I think '96 was when we had our first one, which was I moved on this property. And at the time, there was nothing, no other anything forging related in the state. Uh, and now there's quite a few places that are doing similar things, and the head count is getting larger and larger too at these Hammerins, because Forged in Fire has just started a whole regime of new bladesmiths out there. But it's a great place to learn if you're being taught by a master bladesmith, because those guys, they've been there and done that, and they know, they know steel, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they trustworthy advice there. Well, it was it was a year with a lot of firsts. It's unfortunate to have missed the first one in so long, but I'm sure it will return even stronger as it sounds like it continues to grow.
I think so. Like I say, we've brought some master smiths. Usually the our instructors are master smiths, and they know stock removal, they know forging, they know it all, and the new guys, the young guys coming in, they're just like a sponge, They just absorb stuff and just think, oh, I didn't know this, I didn't know this was out there. I didn't know you could do this. I didn't know how to do that, So it's really, really, really been good for, at least for our part of the country down here, because we're kind of remote. Really, we're uh, closest city is San Antonio, I guess, and uh, but yeah, we'll as long as people want to attend, I guess we'll continue to try to have them.
Mm. Yeah. How's I was recently talking with Steve Hill, actually, who's also in Texas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about that South Texas heat. I can't really imagine forging in that, but hey, that's it's different. I'm a New Englander. I'm used to the cold. I guess you don't mind the heat. It's the same thing.
Well, you get somewhat used to it, but we have one in. Well, both of them that we have, they're in the cooler part of the year, if there is such a thing in South Texas. But it's not the dead heat of the summer.
Right. It's still warm, just not quite as warm.
Correct. Yes.
Transitioning right from Hammerins and teaching and absorbing knowledge. You do a bit of teaching yourself.
I do. I teach four different levels, I'd say. A basic class, which is for a guy right off the street, knows nothing. It's 4 days. Tuition is $2,500, and there's no more than two per class. The student takes home a completed knife that they built from scratch themselves, and the skills, if they've got some basic knife equipment, to go back in their own shop and start making, fixed blade knives. The hardest thing to learn in knife making, at least in my opinion, is how to grind the blade correctly. So we spend a lot of time. I spend days getting practice blades made. I cut them out myself out of bar stock, just mild steel, profile them. And so I'll have them a stack of 25 or 30 blades there when they come in. So I start them off grinding, and they grind till they just want to throw it up and leave, or but if they stick it out, after about 2 days, 2.5 days, they will be able to hollow grind, and they'll can flat grind the blade. And then we switch them over to real knife steel, usually some CPM steel of one blend or the other, and then they'll grind that blade, and we'll heat treat it, temper it, and they'll finish it out, and they'll take home their first fixed blade that they built from scratch. And then for an advanced student, or more advanced, you can take a slip joint pocket knife class, you can take a lockback folder class, or a liner lock folder class, or the only thing I don't teach is an automatic, because the mechanism, and there's no way I could do it in that short period of time. It's been I enjoy doing it. It's a lot of fun. I have what I call an advanced class, where a guy can come in and take that one day at a time, and he can bring me a list of, okay, these are the things I need to work on today, or this is where I'm weak, or this is what I don't understand, and we'll spend the day concentrating on just those individual items, so they can come in. I had one guy, I always have to tell this story. He's an attorney up out of the Dallas Fort Worth area, up there somewhere, but he has a hunting camp about halfway down here. So when he wants to take a class, he goes to the hunting camp one night or one day and hunts and lays over, and then drives in here the next morning, spends the day, goes back to his hunting camp, hunts for a day or two, and goes back home. So he gets a knife class and a hunt out of one day in the knife shop. So, but well, it takes so long to learn this stuff like I did. You know, by hunting peck and just digging it out. But a little one-on-one instruction really can kick a guy on down the road a lot faster.
Now you're saying or it sounds like for the advanced class, that might be somebody who's already sort of a knife maker or someone aspiring to be a knife maker. So
Well,
they might bring in their own knife.
he can't. The advanced class can be pretty much anything. But if he's struggling, learning to grind, having trouble grinding his blades, then that would be something we might concentrate on. But it's like I said, it's wide open. Whatever he wants to do. But they actually have to know how to grind their blade. Now they don't have to know how to grind a perfect blade, but you know. But yeah, it's pretty wide open. But you can't take a new guy right off the street that knows nothing for one day and teach him really anything that's going to stick with him very long. You know, you can talk a lot and do demos, but the hands-on is where you learn.
So in teaching, do you find, is that almost, I don't want to use the term therapeutic, but is it, I mean, is it fulfilling in a knife maker way to sort of to like pass the knowledge on? You sort of see what I'm saying?
I think it is for me for a lot of different reasons. Because I do want to pass it on to somebody that's interested enough, and if they're willing to pay for it, then I'm going to give them their money's worth. And it always makes me feel good when somebody down the road, it could be a year, 2 years, somebody's bragging on their work and they'll say, well, where'd you learn that? Well, I took Johnny's knife making class, you know. So, but yeah, it is very fulfilling because it's so satisfying to see a guy take a knife to build his own knife, you know, and know where he got that skill from.
Right. So in the same vein, because you do have a knife class, I would imagine that was a more recent development. But over the years, have you had apprentices?
No, I've never had an apprentice. No.
Okay. All right.
I've had offers for an apprentice, but I've talked to some other folks, and it just doesn't work out because your apprentice doesn't know anything, so you spend all of your time teaching him what he needs to know, and you're not getting anything done.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I've known several people that have tried it, and it hasn't worked for them, and I think probably the same reasons it wouldn't work for me.
You're right. It's one of those things where you're catching up on somebody else's work and then you're losing time working on your own work, right?
Mm-hmm,
That's
mm-hmm.
I'm always saying that I'm too busy working to be working on someone else's work while I'm working.
Yeah, right. Right, yeah.
And so the knife class is a regular. I mean, obviously this year excluded. Is that a regular happenstance for you? I mean, on a yearly basis otherwise?
Yeah, it has been. I normally schedule 1 week a month, and I'll rotate the classes. Maybe 1 month I'll have a basic class. Maybe the next month I'll have a basic, an advanced class. Maybe the next month I'll have what I call a fine folder class, which is we get it. This is for an experienced guy where we're going to build a high-end knife. You know, fine folder is what I call them, and so on like that. So and I try to keep it as flexible as I can on their schedule as well as on my schedule. You know, if somebody calls up and say, well, you got this class here scheduled for these days, but I can't get off work for those days or whatever. And if I can juggle my dates, I will, for, you know, because I'm here all the time if I'm not gone for a show or something like that. But it's been pretty successful, and I wish I had have taken pictures of all of my students that I've had come through here. I'd probably have my whole every wall in my shop covered.
So how many how long have you been doing the teaching?
Teaching probably 20 years
Oh wow. All right. So
at at least.
you've got it patented down. That's
Well, I know what works for me, and what works for me, I can make work for someone else too. The Like I said, there's never more. I've had one occasion when I had three students, but it was a father and his son that just graduated from high school, and his other son that was a senior in high school, and they lived in Austin, and the father had taken a class from me years ago, and he had a health issue that happened. I don't remember if it was a stroke or something serious, so he got out of knife making real early. But anyway, he brought his two sons over here, and they took it all together, and that was a fun class to do because there was so much camaraderie there between he and I, because we'd been together before, but between he and his sons too, and it was really great. But normally it's just two, one or two. Sometimes I'll do one, but no more than two.
yeah. No, I would imagine that would be that sounds like fun. That sounds like a great father son thing to do.
Oh yeah.
Um, well, so for 20 years, how many of the famous knife makers that we know have secretly taken your class, man? Come on.
Oh God.
Anybody anybody we might know
Mm, well, I'd
been
have to see a list. I can't remember.
take an oath of secrecy? That's fine. I understand.
There have no. There's some guys out there now making. They are making outstanding knives, unbelievable knives. But I'm at a loss now that you asked me the question. I've had so many that it's hard to say, and a lot of them I don't. I'm not able to track because I had one. I've had guys one guy come in from Alaska. I got one guy coming in February from Florida. I've had other people I've had them from far, far, far away. So I don't know much, after they leave here, since they're not close to keep track of them. But
I mean, that's such a neat that sounds, I don't know, that's a great way to pass on the knowledge to create more knife makers, right? To keep the industry, the passion, the hobby sort of continuing. Like you said in the early days, which I do hear from a lot of people that I talk to, which is, this is sort of friendly group of guys sharing information. It was actually competition, which is fine. But
yeah,
that's,
it actually was.
it was a financial, these are my customers. This is my knife. I don't want to tell you, and then you have YouTube, and then, the finality of the one-on-one class where, like you're
Yeah.
saying, is if you want to know bad enough, I will teach you. That's, let's do it.
One of
Um,
the one of the things that I've kind of noticed over the years is I get quite a few people that are retired military. They've never had a hobby before, and they're young men. If they go in when they're 18, 20 years old, and they're 40, 42 years old, they can retire, but they've been jumped all over the world their whole career. Now they're at home. So I get quite a few retirees from the military, and I get quite a few guys just from being retired at 65 or so, and they never had a chance to have a hobby or something, but they're successful. They've got their home, and some of them may even have a shop or a big garage or something. So uh, So I do get a lot of those guys that are just looking for something to do, and something they're interested in. But I really enjoy them. I've never had one person through this shop in any of my classes that I I wouldn't consider as my friend from now on. That just the camaraderie, the relationship that seem like knife makers have. I don't know.
Yeah, it's it's a similar, right? It's a similar mindset for an individual to put themselves in a situation where they spend a great deal of time alone in a shop, working on a single item for an extended period of time. It's yeah, it's a lot of music, I would imagine, or
Yeah,
you know, the
exactly.
the radio when necessary. But yeah, it's a different way to earn a living for sure. You were talking about before commission pieces. Do you know some makers do take orders, some makers build speculatively. Do you find yourself still just building what you want, or you're sort of also, it sounds like you're also during these times taking orders for less dressy options?
Well, I've always taken orders, but up until this year, um, and I'd say probably at least the last 10 years, like we've been doing like 5 or 6 shows a year. So you're constantly coming back from a show, getting ready for the next one, to come back from that one to get ready for the next one. And but I do take orders. I do take orders, and I love orders because that way you can get into a person's psyche, into his mind, and you tell me what you want, and then let's talk about how we get you there, what you want, materials, and a lot of them don't understand the materials that we use today, unless they're more knife related, knowledgeable than the average guy. But you can tell them about all the different handle materials you have, all the different steels that are the options, and on and on and on and on and on. So he could, my order blank, I have it listed that way, so I can build them a very, very, very custom order, and it'll be one of a kind because no one else will ever have one that same way. So I do take orders. I do require a deposit on anything like that. But I still build inventory knives too, just to take to shows. And I never have many on my table at a show. I think the most I've had in quite a while was maybe 6 knives, on the table. But and now I'm down to 2, so I guess I'm gotta get my rear in gear.
Uh-oh. I gotta say, the speaking of having knives available, I was looking earlier today on your website, and I saw a beautiful doctor's knife with traditional scales, but it featured some engraving, and I just thought it was a great way to have sort of a traditional style, sort of practical doctor's knife with a little bit of engraving. Really turns it up just the right amount, because I think it still had a mammoth bone or pick bone handle, but it also had engraving, which it was a great mixture, without going full bore Damascus, just a beautiful polished blade, with the tool. Oh, I guess it's not really a spatula. What would they call the
I think that is that blade that in that doctor's knife is a spatula blade.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of them will have like a spear point and a spatula, and I've made them both ways. I don't remember that particular knife, but
It
yeah, I've made a few of those, and never one for a doctor before. But
funny how that works.
yeah, I know.
Yeah. I think that the doctors that might have used that are no longer practicing.
Probably.
Um,
Although I do have a couple of good doctors as collectors. So thankfully for that. Yeah, matter of fact, I'm shipping one out to one tomorrow.
There we go. Yeah, it's such a nice balance to see a maker able to pull off, right, just like a trapper, stainless, polished blades and scales, and then the other end, which is the full dress automatic. It seems like you've sort of mastered both ends and everything in between, which is quite impressive.
Well, there's I think there's something out there for everyone. It just depends on, first of all, budget is a lot of it. You know, wants and needs. What depends on a style that someone wants that maybe someone else doesn't do. But yeah, there's so many good knife makers today. It's just amazes me that they are out there, and the learning curve is just, I went to sleep last night and I woke up this morning, now I know how to make a knife. One of those kind of deals, it seems like. But no, there's just a lot of the older guys now, their work is even better than ever. I mean, they're still doing good work, but I mean, they're not old necessarily in age, but they've been in knife making for a while, and their work is just, I think if you stay with it, the passion just gets more passionate, you know, and you can apply that to your work. Seems like it. I try to do that.
The maturity of age and mind are probably not always linked, but they often can be in knife makers, and you see that in skill. Certainly, the longer you do anything, um, even if you are a master level knife maker, you're always unhappy with your work, thankfully for the rest of us, and that means you just continue to build better and better work that you're a little more happy with.
Well, I keep trying, and I guess as long as people are ordering and buying, I'll keep on delivering as long as I can.
See, that's I think that's the way to do it. Yeah, for sure. There's just no end in sight as long as the customers are still hungry.
Yeah, there's a good way to put it.
Um, is there anything that we haven't gone over that you wanted to go over? Did I miss anything? Any details? I mean, it's impossible to cover one person's entire life, but we try.
Not that I can think of. I think I kind of started out with my first youngest days as having a knife up until just recently, and it's evolved, and I hope I'm not through evolving. I mean, I always want my next knife to be better than my last one. And to be honest with you, I'm rarely, rarely, rarely ever happy with a knife when I'm through with it. I can look at it and I will pick it to pieces. And my wife keeps telling me, if you'd take those glasses off, you couldn't see all those scratches. She does say that, I promise. I said, yeah, but if I can see them, I know they're on there.
That's right. See, exactly. Yep. That's it's a good partner to have.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't ask for a better one there as far as support goes. Whew.
There you go. Very cool. Well, on that note, I wanna thank you, so much for taking time out of your day, out of your schedule, to sit down with me. I really I genuinely appreciate it. What's the best way for people to find your work and to see your work and to contact you?
Uh, I've probably got more pictures on my website at stoutknives.com. Um, I try to stay pretty active on Facebook and Instagram, not as active. Oh, I did take a picture of the microphone today with a deal. I don't know if you saw that or not
I,
on
I,
Facebook.
I did, I did indeed. I need to.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, good. I thought maybe that's what you had in mind, but I wasn't sure, so I thought, well, I'll do it anyway. Uh, no, I think pretty much we've covered it. Yeah, and I appreciate you just taking the time to even have me on here. I've enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's I'm trying to record as much history as I can. I'm worried that I don't want the history to disappear without it being recorded.
Yeah.
I fear I've missed some crucial points, and I'm trying to make sure that I don't miss any more.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it. Anything I can do for you or with you or whatever in the future, just give me a shout.
Absolutely. And your website is a good place to look for the schedule for the classes.
Yes. I've got a I don't think I've got anything. Well, I've got one student coming in February, but I think my classes are on there. My available knives are on there for sale. And there's hundreds and hundreds of pictures. If anybody just wants to look at pictures of knives, they're on there under archive or one of those links on there. My contact information is there, email, phone number, etc. So, but yeah, I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I've enjoyed it. I hope it was worthwhile for you.
Absolutely, it very much was. I want to thanks again for coming on, and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Okay, have a good night.